this illumination that was moving with respect to the stars. We were smart enough to not say, Houston, there's a light out there that's following us. So technically, it becomes an unidentified flying object.
Apollo 11 astronaut Buzz Aldrin, the second man to walk on the moon, admits a UFO seemingly tracked the spacecraft from a relatively close distance. Although he persistently denies allegations that he and fellow astronaut Neil Armstrong encountered aliens on the moon, other former members of NASA say otherwise.
There have been a lot of rumors about what actually took place during the lunar mission while Neil and Buzz were on the lunar surface. Back at the Johnson Space Center, during a couple of minutes of broken communication, Neil switched over to the medical channel to speak directly with the chief medical officer of the mission. And at that, the comment was, he says, they're here, they're parked around the rim of the crater, and they're watching us.
Interestingly, the late Neil Armstrong made cryptic comments at the White House in 1994 for the 25th anniversary of the Apollo 11 mission that have made many people wonder if a cover-up might be involved.
We leave you much that is undone. There are great ideas undiscovered, breakthroughs available to those who can remove one of truth's protective layers. There are places to go beyond belief.
I've always wondered why Neil Armstrong mentioned something about pulling back a veil of secrecy in science and truth in that press conference on the 25th anniversary of the Apollo 11 landing. I mean, I have no idea what he was referencing, and I don't think we'll ever know.
Yet another NASA mission, the one ET believer Edgar Mitchell was on, might have filmed the definitive evidence of aliens on the moon.
The Apollo 14 mission was a really pivotal mission. Most people don't realize that only 2 of the astronauts were actually walked on the surface of the moon, and the other one stayed on board in the command module and continued to circle around and around the moon and taking film strips and photographs, so we were completely covering all of the backside of the moon.
Back on Earth, the footage was shown to one of NASA's top astronomers. During the viewing, an extraordinary sequence came on screen.
The command module is coming around the backside of the moon with the cameras rolling, and there's like a cluster of 5 little domes with lights shining inside, and there was one of them that there was looked like a column of steam or something projected up from the top. So there was something really there. I can guarantee you it was certainly something that was not a natural occurrence on the moon.
But when the footage was played again the next day for NASA engineers, the key section with the mysterious domes had somehow disappeared.
I took the film out, and there was no splices, there were no cuts, and all the holes lined up. That means within 24 hours, they had to have taken the film out, cut the portion out, made a copy, airbrushed it out, spliced it back in, and then made a duplicate of it and had it available for him.
Such accusations that NASA has routinely airbrushed out evidence of alien activity acquired during its space missions has swirled for decades. But skeptics are not so easily convinced.
If a NASA photo manager told me that he had screened Apollo 14 footage for astronomers that had shown some sort of glowing lights on the moon, that then that section of the film was spliced out, I would wonder whether the film was damaged. I would wonder if there was a reason that the film had to be tampered with. I wouldn't necessarily say it's covering up aliens.
But NASA might have had motivation to cover up ET artifacts on the moon. Prior to the Apollo missions, a Brookings Institution report warned NASA officials that such a discovery of an ET presence would result in nothing short of the disintegration of society as we know it.
There definitely appears to be, between all the different things that I've looked at, there definitely appears to be an agenda to keep hidden from the general public what's actually on the moon. There's no question that there's artificial structures and bases there, and that's just something that NASA does not want people to realize. The governmental belief is that if enough people actually came to the conclusion that there was some sort of forward base and advanced base on the moon, that we would go crazy, we would stop going to work, we would stop being productive, our society would stop moving forward, everything would grind to a halt, and we'd be thrown back into the Stone Age.
Maybe that's one reason why Buzz Aldrin, when asked to view photos containing potential alien structures, refused to do so, suggesting that others at NASA had that responsibility.
No, wait a minute. Don't you think the people who designed the camera sent it out as an experiment when the pictures came back? They looked at them to see if there was anything unusual and they didn't find anything. If they had, either we got some people who were scared to talk about it, or they're withholding evidence. And that's not what science is about. Science is about informing people what evidence has been found. And those are experts.
The Soviet Union in July of 1988 launched 2 probes to Mars, Phobos 1 and Phobos 2. Now, approximately a month or so after launch, Phobos 1 disappeared. The Russians lost it. Now, they attributed this loss to a combination of computer and human error.
But the story that subsequently emerged is far more chilling. Russian researchers went public, claiming a shadowy, unidentified craft may have destroyed Phobos 1 before going on to eliminate Phobos 2 in a startling sequence of events captured on film. Just before vanishing forever, Phobos 2 photographed what might be a gigantic alien spaceship with bad intentions. Broadcast on Russian television and described as a thin ellipse, the image resembles a needle or dagger aimed at the Martian moon. Whatever its true shape, it is estimated to be larger than any craft mankind has conceived of.
I'm talking about 25 kilometers in length and 1.5 kilometers in diameter. Now, according to Glave-Cosmos, the Russian agency at that time, this object or something turned toward their spacecraft and rammed it, knocked it out of orbit.
The American defense establishment curiously remained silent about the incident, perhaps because American probes have reportedly been destroyed near Mars as well.
But we do know for certain that several unmanned missions, spacecraft missions to Mars that had been launched by NASA, that we lost several. And these were expensive missions that as they got closer to Mars, suddenly they just stopped operating. It didn't happen just once, it happened at least 2 times where we lost billion-dollar spacecraft for unknown reasons, and NASA still has never come forward with what they know really happened.
Is NASA withholding information about a dangerous alien presence operating around Mars? Recent photographs taken by the Mars Curiosity rover suggest a UFO similar to what seemingly destroyed Russian and perhaps US space probes might still be patrolling the Martian skies. Earlier this year, the rover's cameras captured an almost identical cylindrical-shaped UFO as the one Phobos 2 photographed back in 1989, right before it was obliterated. This time, the cylinder appears to be rocketing over the planet, remaining in view for roughly 10 minutes before disappearing. Researchers first believed the moving image resulted from the camera shutter staying open, producing a time-lapse effect. But upon examination, the shutter speed was normal. Alarmingly, some military insiders say the US government is keenly aware there's a real ET threat facing us.
We were aware there was a possibility of an unknown presence, possibly alien, extraterrestrial, near the Earth.
John Brandenburg is the former deputy manager of the Clementine mission, a classified operation designed to map and investigate all corners of the moon.
It was a photo reconnaissance mission, basically to check out if someone was building bases on the moon that we didn't know about. Were they expanding them?
Brandenburg says Clementine's lunar photos were analyzed by an elite Defense Department team with the highest security clearance.
They basically kept to themselves and just did their work. And we were told not to interfere with them unless we had a special reason. So only the higher-ups from the Naval Research Lab went up there.
But Brandenburg recalls a previous screening he did have with top military brass who were studying riveting footage showing UFOs navigating away from a laser-like weapon being fired upon them.
there I am sitting in this room full of retired Army and Air Force generals and a few admirals, and we're watching what looks like a firefight in space. The most senior general there, an Army general, turned to me and said, "Where do you think they're from?" And I said, "I don't know, sir. I've heard they're from 40 light years from here." And his comment was, "Long supply lines." When an Army general says long supply lines, he's already thinking of, how do I deal with these people from far away? How do I make them go back to where they came from? The reaction of numerous space defense officials who I watched these movies with was fear and astonishment.
It's NASA footage like this, showing UFOs flying so close to our planet, and the veil of secrecy he witnessed during Clementine's mapping of the lunar surface that prompted Brandenburg to begin searching for proof-positive photos of aliens on the moon. Once he saw the main structure depicted on the cover of ULO's, Unidentified Lunar Objects Revealed in NASA Photography, he knew he had hit pay dirt.
Of all the pictures I've seen from the moon that show possible structures, the most impressive is a picture of a miles-wide rectilinear structure. This looks unmistakably artificial, and it shouldn't be there. As somebody in the space defense community, I look on any such structure on the moon with great concern because it isn't ours. There's no way we could have built such a thing. It means someone else is up there.
In this striking photo taken by Apollo 15, you can clearly see the structure from orbit, looking like a sprawling complex, or prison, as some have described it, stretching out across the lunar terrain. What could it possibly represent? Here in this digital simulation of what it might be like to fly in from space and circle the structure, we can see what it might look like up close, either today or in the moon's distant past. Finding this Apollo 15 image was just the beginning of Brandenburg's discovery process. Photo after photo presented in the book and also available in NASA's official archive added to his conviction that the US government knows of an alien presence on the moon. And he embarked on a mission to help bring the best images into the public spotlight and alert our citizens of the considerable stakes involved. Donna Hare remembers the first time she witnessed a NASA colleague altering a similarly provocative image, one showing a hovering flying saucer.
I looked at him and I said, "Is it a UFO?" And he's smiling at me and he crosses his arms and he says, "I can't tell you that." And I said, "What are you going to do with this piece of information?" He says, "We have to airbrush these out." After I realized that, I started asking different people that worked out there. And what I found was some people knew about it and other people didn't. But the people that told me that there was a cover-up would tell me off-site. They wouldn't talk about it. They'd tell me, "Don't ever say I said it," or I'll say I didn't.
Hare reveals that retouching out possible evidence of aliens in our skies and on the lunar surface is par for the course. And NASA has strict guidelines for deciding what images to alter.
What was censored in the photographs was technology that's not related to us, really, that is really high tech. The craft that I saw being taken out was right over the trees. I don't know of anything that can hover like that. One time I went into the slide lab where they airbrush, and the woman that was airbrushing out negatives, she was trying to cover up something on the moon.
But this eye-opening footage shot by Apollo 8 as the astronauts circled the moon has never been suppressed, nor explained for that matter. Is it evidence of possible industrial-like technology existing there?
In 1968, as Apollo 8 flew over the lunar surface, one of their cameras captured an anomaly. It looks similar to a smokestack jutting from the surface of the moon. And just as the camera passes by, it appears to release some kind of a jet, like a little cloud that drifts to the right.
According to researchers, what makes the film sequence so extraordinary is how it's shot.
One thing that makes this footage special is that you can see motion within the span of stills. I mean, as the camera is moving over the lunar surface, you actually see this smokestack-like anomaly change perspective as it gets closer and closer to the camera.
Russians say they saw smoke rising from Kepler, but in the medium there's no smoke evident.
Apollo 8 was flying 70 miles above the lunar surface when it shot this footage. Viewable in both black and white and color. The smokestack has been estimated to be more than 1,000 feet tall. Is this gigantic structure somehow connected to the same vast mining operation seemingly documented in NASA's Lunar Orbiter 3-162 photo of Kepler crater? Also, what exactly is being mined here and throughout the moon? Scientists have discovered the moon's surface is rich with helium-3, a fuel that can, in theory, run highly efficient nuclear fusion reactors. Helium-3 could well be the solution to the world's growing energy needs. Its existence on the moon was confirmed during the Apollo 17 mission. There are altogether 15 tons of helium-3 on Earth, while the moon holds more than 5 million tons trapped in the surface material called regolith.
This helium-3 on the moon could be used not only by us, but by aliens. And then what we are seeing is part of the mining operation.
Could this also explain the apparent equipment, carving deep tracks in the lunar surface, like a circular saw? U.S. Defense Department concerns about apparent alien activity in space and on the moon have been confirmed by a top military expert. And the photographic evidence in NASA's own archives suggesting there might actually be ET lunar bases with potential nuclear capability is frightening, especially when compared to one of the most dangerous confrontations in history, which could have ended human civilization.
Having seen the pictures that triggered the Cuban Missile Crisis, I look on these images as even more provocative, even more suggestive that somebody is building structures where they shouldn't be, on our moon.
Now, if we kind of draw a parallel with what's going on the moon, maybe we're actually seeing some sort of staging post that in the same way Cuba was a threat to the United States in '62, the moon is subtly and slowly being turned into a threat to the people of Earth.
What worries researchers, and presumably military brass, are what the aliens might be planning.
If hostile extraterrestrials are on the surface of the moon and are planning some sort of assault on the Earth, then I would hope and think that government and military agencies are preparing something as a counterforce. Now, whether they would actually have the ability to, that's the big question. If we're dealing with creatures, with entities that are far in advance of us, I often wonder, would we even stand a chance, or would it be game over before it even barely began?
With such potentially dire stakes for mankind involved, Mark D'Antonio, a photo and video analyst with more than 30 years of experience, is attempting to determine if the most compelling photographic evidence proves an alien threat is real. So far, his investigation has determined we have real reasons for concern.
Well, there is a lot of very compelling video and photo evidence that indicates that something is happening out there. There are some structures I have seen in images that I've received of the moon that I have not been able to explain.
Images like this one that mystify both D'Antonio and Defense Department expert Brandenburg.
There's an interesting structure on the moon that I've seen that looks like several wagon wheels in a row, either embedded into the lunar surface or just sitting there kind of on an angle.
It seems to show a large, flat structure, and then below it, some either wheel or dome-like structures. And this is clearly provocative. This does not look like a natural geologic feature.
Could these massive wheels, half buried beneath the lunar surface, be designed for mining, excavation, or possibly traversing the rocky lunar landscape in a vehicle otherworldly in scale?
Anyone who analyzes this knows it's of enormous size. These things are miles across. If someone built this, they're very busy, very vigorous. These things are taller than the Sears Tower.
And what is happening on the moon? Earlier this year, millions of people began poring over this image captured by Google Moon that many major news outlets suggested could be an alien base. Writer Lee Spiegel covered the story for the popular Huffington Post.
Recently, something came to my attention that someone had used the Google Moon application. And this person zoomed in closer and closer and came up with an image. It's triangular, 2 lines of 7 lights, perfectly spaced between each other. And that those lights are sitting what looks like a black surface. And then immediately below the black surface is a very bright white light. And so the questions started coming up. Is this an extraterrestrial colony? What is this on the moon?
Though some researchers have called this a digital artifact, others still feel it could be an actual lunar construction.
Is it an installation? We really don't know, other than the fact that it has these angles, it has these bright lights, and it really does appear to be man-made in some format at least.
Perhaps concern over unexplained images like these is prompting governments to investigate. October 1st, 2010. China launches its Chang'e 2 lunar orbiter. Soon, web surfers everywhere are mesmerized by this stunning image.
This particular piece of footage seems to show what looks like an installation, a facility, a factory maybe, on the surface of the moon. It kind of looks like an aerial photograph of something along the lines of a North Pole installation or outpost. Clear angles, right angles, seeming to show something like an intelligently built structure. The big question is, what is it? What's it being used for?
The vivid pictures sparked heated debate among believers and skeptics alike.
It was all over the place, all around the world, not just UFO researchers reading it and watching it, but actually members of the general public as well, in their millions.
But top lunar researchers soon discovered that the image comes not from the Chinese orbiter, but from the archives of NASA.
It turns out that it's actually a lunar orbiter photograph, so it's actually something NASA took a picture of. The problem is, while it looks really authentic and it's certainly impressive, and there's no question that if it's a legitimate photo that it's artificial, the reality is that there's no frame number associated with it, so nobody really knows what to go back and check.
Despite the image's original misidentification as coming from the Chinese space program, China's recent landing of a rover on the moon might have sparked renewed interest in the rovers NASA is currently operating on Mars. April 8, 2014, TV news outlets throughout America began reporting how this puzzling bright light was captured on or beneath the planet Mars by NASA's Curiosity rover. Though some scientists suspect it could be caused by the sun's reflection or cosmic rays, no one knows for sure what the origin is. It was while researching landing sites on Phobos that Aldrin learned of the monolith, a huge stone slab almost 300 feet across that is similar to the alien structure in the classic sci-fi film 2001: A Space Odyssey. Aldrin finds it interesting that a scientist has come forward supporting the notion this could be artificial.
It surprised me that an extremely credible person, a professor, who is part of professional societies in the subject of settlements and colonization, he's aware of this, and he says Absolutely, without a doubt, it is not a natural formation. He doesn't know anything other than that, but he just says it's just not.
And Aldrin recognizes that such academic support in the alien origin hypothesis for the Phobos monolith could help get people excited about exploring Mars and its moons.
I am interested in the public supporting what we're doing for varieties of reasons. And if some kooky part of the public over here thinks that this monolith has been put there by aliens, fine. They're going to create a lot of enthusiasm, and it's going to get people wondering, and they're not going to be satisfied until it's proven one way or the other, and even then.
Phobos has always been a source of controversy. In the early 1960s, several prominent physicists claimed that the moon was actually an artificial satellite pulled into Martian orbit by aliens. The theory has its supporters even today, but there's a bigger mystery about Phobos, unsolved for almost 30 years, one which investigators are still trying to explain.
Our moon is an object that exists in our immediate space. For years, there have been anomalies recorded such as mysterious lights, flashes, and objects that have been seen by astronomers here on Earth. NASA released a compilation of these recorded reports prior to the first moon mission.
Gemini 7 here, you looking on your 8? Left clear, 7, go ahead. Approach you at 10 o'clock time. This is Houston, say again, 7? I said we're approaching you at 10 o'clock time. Right here.
Billy Control here again. The reference in that conversation was bogies. It was Borman who reported citing the bogies. This is Gemini Control Houston at 4 hours, 24 minutes into the flight.
Well, as far as the moon is concerned, I think they found when they got up there that there was already somebody there. And I wouldn't want to say any more than that. But they got out of there and they haven't been back. But I have seen certain documents and read certain reports that indicate that there's somebody already there that knows a lot more than we do and would be willing to run us off if we didn't go on our own. I doubt that we will go to the moon again.
It has been argued that the moon could be used as an indicator of extraterrestrial visits to our solar system. Unfortunately, the detection of ET artifacts on the moon is outside the interests of most mainstream archaeologists, as archaeology tends to adhere to a pre-Copernican geocentric point of view. It is generally accepted that the search for alien artifacts on the moon is not necessary because there are none. Given the success in using terrestrial remote sensing to find archaeological sites on Earth, can similar techniques be used to find possible artificial construction on the moon and other planets? For example, the ancient Khorasan fortress Khoi Kragan Kala in Uzbekistan, constructed between the 4th century BC to the 1st century AD, appeared as an impact crater before excavation in 1956. On the moon, Khoi Kragan Kala would not be perceived among all the other impact craters. In 1962, Carl Sagan spoke on the possibility of discovering alien artifacts on the moon, stating that forthcoming photographic reconnaissance of the moon from space vehicles, particularly the far side, might bear these possibilities in mind. Rectangular patterns on airspace photos are recognized as signs of human culture in the remote sensing of the Earth and air archaeology. It seems reasonable, then, to search for rectangular patterns on the Moon or on Mars.
In mid-1965, I was loaned to the Lunar Orbiter Project at NASA on Langley Field. They had problems with a piece of electronic equipment that was bottlenecking their production of photographs. I was taken into the laboratory where the equipment was malfunctioning. The Airman Second Class was in the dark room at that time. I was also an Airman Second Class. About 30 minutes into the process, he said to me, in a very distressed way, by the way, we've discovered a base on the backside of the Moon. And then he proceeded to put photographs down in front of me, and clearly in these photographs were structures, spherical buildings, and towers.
Always airbrush these out before we sell them to the public.
Mosaics and showed this base, which had geometric shapes. There were towers, there were spherical buildings, there were very tall towers and things that looked somewhat like radar dishes, but they were large structures. If I compare it to what I'm seeing now, because I do have photographs that have artifacts in them that are similar to what I saw, they're massive. Some of the structures are, half a mile in size. So they're huge structures. Some of the buildings seem to have very reflective surfaces on them. A couple of structures that I saw reminded me of cooling towers at power generating plants. They had that sort of a shape. Some of them that were just very, very straight and tall with a flat top. The particular shot that I saw, there were several clustered together over a landscape, a fairly large landscape. I worked there for 3 more days, and I remember going home and naively thinking, I can't wait to hear about this on the evening news. And here it is, more than 30 years later, and I hope we hear about it tonight. And I will testify under oath before Congress that what I'm saying is the truth.
In 1959, the U.S. Army completed a plan for a manned military outpost on the moon. The Horizon Lunar Outpost was said to be necessary to protect United States interests on the moon, to conduct moon-based surveillance of the Earth and space, to act as a communications relay, and to serve as a base for exploration of the moon. The permanent outpost would cost $6 billion and become operational in December 1966 with 12 soldiers. The base would be defended against Russian overland attack by man-fired weapons. The Apollo program began only 2 years after the Horizon report, but a moon base would not have been established earlier than the 1970s.
During the discussion of UFOs, the question ultimately is going to come up, can any government keep secrets, let alone the U.S. government? And the answer to that is unequivocally yes.
People in high-level government have very, very little, if any, information, valid information about this. Most have no more knowledge than the man in the street.
There's always been what they call the need to know.
They keep pretty much each organization an island unto itself.
I looked at him and I was pretty startled because I'd worked out there several years and never seen anything like this, never heard of anything like this.
I had a top secret crypto clearance, and I could go into areas where my commanders, some commanders could not even get in.
He was a civilian, but had done a lot of work with NASA on a lot of committees and what have you. And I think his problem was the fact that he hadn't heard about this.
They can't get in there because they don't have the need to know, even though they have the same clearance as the guy that gets to go in there.
He knew that he was very important because he was on a lot of committees in NASA. And since he was very important but hadn't heard about this thing, this couldn't be true.
The UFO secrets can be kept secret from other people who have the same security clearance.
And the truth is, they have hidden things like UFO and extraterrestrial information from us for years. Not just the current era, but back before the 1900s.
There's about 38 levels above top secret. The highest is cosmic. That's, okay, I'll tell you right off now, that's UFOs, aliens, and particleization. Now, like you heard a while ago, there's only probably about 25 people in the world that know things that are known at that level. No president has had that level, has ever been cleared for that level. Eisenhower was the closest. Eisenhower wanted somebody to be in charge. He tried the CIA director, and it didn't work. CIA was working primarily for itself. Most of the intelligence directors of the services were working for themselves.
What happened was Eisenhower got sold out. I think that he realized that all of a sudden this matter is going into the control of corporations. He realized that he was losing control. He realized that the phenomenon of whatever it was that we were faced with was not going to be in the best hands, and those were as far as I can remember, that was the expression that was used. It's not going to be in the best hands.
In the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex. the potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power exists and will persist. We must never let the weight of this combination endanger our liberties or democratic processes. We should take nothing for granted. Only an alert and knowledgeable citizenry can compel the proper meshing of the huge industrial and military machinery of defense with our peaceful methods and goals.
And so it was organized under the name the NRO. You couldn't mention NRO.
NRO, National Reconnaissance Office, basically run by the Air Force. The Reconnaissance Office, from my understanding of people that I've had contacts with since I retired, has taken on a lot more responsibility, particularly towards UFO and extraterrestrial activities. You could say that they picked up where Blue Book dropped off.
If you're on that level, there's an organization worldwide called ACIO. That's Alien Contact Intelligence Organization. If you pay your dues and you follow the rules, you can benefit, your government is allowed to benefit from that organization's information.
Henry Kissinger headed some sort of a study group back in the 50s to study the ramifications of this information if it had leaked through a credible source. In fact, Jimmy Carter was not brought into the loop. They, for some reason, the group, the control group, they don't trust the guy for some reason. They don't trust Jimmy Carter. They were afraid that he would come out and make statements, blanketed statements to the news media.
I was contacted by Ms. Marcia Smith, who was the director of the Science and Technology Division of the Congressional Research Service. She asked to meet with me, and I met with her, and she informed me that President Carter, upon taking office in January of 1977, held a meeting with then the Director of Central Intelligence, who was George Bush Sr., and demanded that the Director of Central Intelligence turn over to the President the classified information about unidentified flying objects and the information that was in the possession of the United States intelligence community concerning the existence of extraterrestrial intelligence. This information was refused to the President of the United States by the Director of Central Intelligence, George Bush Sr.
Told us we could not talk about this to anyone, including any of the other crews, our spouses, our family, even amongst each other. So we could not discuss this at all.
In the military, they do ridicule you, and I was ridiculed a few times. I was told I would never make Master Sergeant. I was on orders for tech, but I was told I would never make Master Sergeant when I brought this crap up again.
The pilots that had seen things and talked about it, some of them were let go, some of them released from their flying and treated as nutcases and things like that.
At times I used to carry a nuclear weapon. In other words, I was mentally fit to carry nuclear weapons, but I'm not mentally fit if I see a UFO. Well, this criticism and this ridicule has, I think, done more to keep the story coming out than almost anything else.
It had been discussed with me on numerous occasions. Talked about what could happen to me militarily and what could happen to me even if I discussed this as a civilian.
That subject just was dropped. It just wasn't discussed.
Anything to discredit you, and you'd never get a promotion, and I'd spend the next 3.5 years up the North Pole living in a tent checking the weather balloon.
It crashed in White Sands, New Mexico. We tracked it. We were tracking it at the time, and we were successful in damaging enough where it crashed.
I can verify, corroborated by the people that I have worked with and do work with now.
I made a comment that was really funny at that particular point. I didn't really connect it with anything until later. He says, "You have no idea at all what we're about, do you?" And I told him, "No, sir, I don't." He says, "Well, someday the technology will be out there that has been totally back-engineered." Went right over my head at that particular point.
When we gave the information out, we gave it out and insisted they take the patents. But also we put a little bit of a requirement on that. Requirement, feed it back to us for the competitive edge of the Army. Take the patents, make all the money you want, but give it to the American people and give it to the world. The Japanese, they interviewed me, and I told them when we put the integrated circuit out, we also gave it to you.
Also had fiber optics laying there. They didn't know what these things were. They figured they were wires of some sort, but didn't know how they operate. The interesting thing that shows you that we have not achieved the point of where these fiber optics are is my dad would also hold them in his hand, and when he closed his hand around them, the ends would be glowing. So this means they contain their own energy.
Hey, well, why would you need a fiber optic system in a spaceship? Well, okay, if suddenly everything in the vehicle suddenly becomes mass canceled, and even the electrons become mass canceled, it means that all of the telemetry that's going through your system is going to go out of haywire. It's going to be like suddenly the system goes through a phase change and everything's superconducting. Why use fiber optics? Because photons have no mass, supposedly, so they're unaffected. So it means that any information, any telemetry that you send back and forth to your computer, it doesn't matter if the computer functions at the superconducting level because it just makes it faster, more efficient, smarter. But you want to be able to control the aircraft so it doesn't crash. What's the best way to do it with fiber optics?
A second innovation involves the delicate task of monitoring composite surfaces against pressure, stress, strain, and chemical decomposition. This is often achieved through a series of Bragg rating sensors located along lengths of fiber optics which are embedded into composite materials. However, NASA has increased the sensing locations exponentially from what is currently available. Applications for the macrofiber composite are almost limitless.